thanks. Yeah, excited to be taking part of the camp, although this is virtual one, so I'm sure I'll sort of miss the late night campfires with s'mores and grilled hot dogs or whatever you want to grill. So yeah, I'll be talking a bit about IDEs and IDE-like tools and how those can actually help to increase the productivity working with Kubernetes, or could help. I mean, we're not there yet with the tools that we have. So couple of sort of disclaimers first. I'll be using the term IDE somewhat loosely here. So in the context of Kubernetes, I'm mostly referring to tools that actually help you make sense of Kubernetes well, as much as it's humanly possible. But more like end user tools that provide these IDE-like functionalities and views. I'll be also using the role developer quite freely. As you know, many of us are doing this sort of DevOps or Dev XYZ ops or and whatnot. So more suitable term would have probably been a person who interacts with the Kubernetes API through some tools, but of course that would have been too long to write on the slides. So yeah, my name is Jussi. I work as a staff engineer at Mirantis. Our team actually focuses on building tools and solutions around Kubernetes and all these cloud native sort of ecosystem. And we really emphasize our work on sort of driving the tools and technologies to be more accessible and user friendly. Whenever I'm talking about Kubernetes, I really remember this fantastic tweet by Kelsey. He mentioned that Kubernetes is really a sort of platform for platforms, and I think we've seen that become more and more reality in the past year or 2 years. So we've seen a rapid rise of usage of CRDs and operators and whatnot. This sort of a bit higher level tooling on top of Kubernetes. But I think as a community, we've been putting a lot of focus on building these platform level features and functionalities. But to be honest, I kind of think that we might have a bit forgotten the sort of end user tooling and end user capabilities to really allow people to control and sort of see their applications, how they're running on the clusters a bit better. Of course, this is somewhat natural as the platform has to be really stable and in a good shape before we start to wire up these higher level features and things. It's like building a house. You can't really build a roof without having the sort of solid and state foundation. But now that Kubernetes is on 1.18 series in version number, I think it's pretty stable ground. So maybe we should be looking at things more from the top down, from the pure end user perspective. And I think the technology radar is actually something that drives this sort of a thinking also more in the future. I really remember when I started coding, we basically had only like text editors at our hands, like really like TextPad on a Windows. Of course, with that you get super narrow view what you're doing, and making a typo and finding about it like half an hour later when you try to compile things, it's a painful and a bit slow feedback loop. So if you compare that to the sort of coding IDEs that we have nowadays, they provide more like macroscopic view to the context that you're working on. So with an IDE like Visual Studio Code or Eclipse or IntelliJ or whatever WebStorm you use, you get a lot of information combined in a single view. And of course, the IDE will sort of yell at you if you are making typos. So you really get the feedback directly. although I'm somehow still able to make typos. Don't ask me how that's possible. Maybe my IDE should slap me or something. But I think the key point here is the macroscopic view. So your IDE can really help you to write better and better structured and more quality code. And this is really also true in a phase of Kubernetes. So you really cannot see the big picture if you are looking a single resource YAML representation for a single pod, for example. So pretty much the fundamental question that we have when we are working with Kubernetes is the fact that how is my application running? Of course, what is the application might change depending on what sort of a hat you have on. So if I'm a developer, the sort of end user application that I'm really building, the end user service that I'm providing is my application. Then again, if you have your ops hat on, the application might be some of those platform level things like Istio or some other platform level feature. Or in some cases, maybe the application is Kubernetes itself, especially in this sort of a multi cluster management sort of cases where you deploy some resources on a existing cluster and magically you get another cluster. Maybe actually one of the problems from the end user tooling point of view, at least if thinking about this general purpose IDE like tooling and functionality, maybe one of the problems is actually the definition of an application. Of course, it's pretty much always as everything in Kubernetes is defined by these resources. It's of course an application is a set of resources, but how do you actually manage that? Maybe it's a Helm chart, maybe it's a set of YAMLs, some developer pushed manually by kubectl, or maybe it's something coming through GitOps or something else. And actually in the past, like maybe half a year, I've been at points thinking that whether things would be easier or not if Kubernetes as such had a native construct for an application, something that bundles resources together. I don't know. Maybe that's something that we should be thinking of. And then to really answer the question that how is my application running, when thinking about this microscopic versus macroscopic view difference with the text editor and IDE, we really would benefit a lot if we can follow some of the same patterns and functionalities that are currently available in different IDEs. We really have to be able to navigate between different related resources, from deployments to pods to services, ingresses, volumes, whatnot, and however these resources fit together and connect to each other. Even more important, in my opinion, is to have this sort of a macroscopic views on the applications. So for example, with kubectl, with a single command, I basically get a single resource back. And to be able to see the big picture, I have to punch in like 15 different commands or do some scripts around it or something. But in this IDE thinking, it would be nice to have a single view where I get to see all the pod details, all the deployment details, whatever details I need, plus all the related information like metrics, events, maybe some information from open tracing and logs and whatnot. So to really have this sort of a bird's eye view how things are working. Because that's what IDEs do for you when you're coding. They show a lot of information on version control history and whatnot in a single view. And also, we should have like seamless integration with the different ecosystem building blocks around. like Helm charts, CRDs, different operators, Prometheus, and all the sort of tools that are more or less de facto standards in every single Kubernetes deployment nowadays. And of course, most of us have to actually manage many different applications in many different clusters. So this sort of end user tooling should really allow you easily switch contexts, like your coding IDE allows you to do in like switch the reports you're working on, switch the project, and those sort of things. At least I've had too much mistakes with kubectl pointing to the wrong cluster. I guess we've all done that. I think that's one of the rites of passage in a world of cloud native. I just wanted to point out some of the tools that are sort of going into this more like this IDE direction. It's of course an argument whether these are IDEs already or not, but at least they have some of these IDE-like functionalities and sort of patterns in use. So I wanted to point out some of these. And K8s, for example, is a fantastic CLI version of a sort of dashboard IDE. Lens, that's actually a desktop more graphical tool. Disclaimer: I'm one of the maintainers on Lens project. Then of course Octant, that's sort of web-based dashboard and has also some of these IDE like functionalities. Then of course you can sort of customize your Visual Studio Code, for example, with a lot of different Kubernetes plugins, and they probably will help you manage your applications, or can help you at least. Of course, there's many others, but at least these are the ones that I've been personally sort of poking around with and seeing that these are sort of going at least a bit into the IDE direction. So as you probably noticed, I didn't have so many answers to give. Maybe I was trying to more like spark the discussion and around these sort of end user facing IDE like tools, and I guess my sort of call to action for everybody on the camp now is to try out these different tools and join the communities and help us drive the tools to a more IDE-like patterns and usage flows and thus help make everybody's life easier and thus help us being more productive. All right, thanks. I don't have anything other than that to share.